Ladies and gentlemen, CCW Day 1 continues here at the Mirage in Las Vegas. The sessions keep getting better, the knowledge keeps getting more powerful, the networking keeps getting more communal. I'm running out of adjectives because this truly is a great event. But what's great about it is what the lasting impact will be. Instead of just being a chance to hear about trends in the industry, see cool technology, it's really about understanding ways to make life better for your customers, easier for your agents, more lucrative for your business. One of the organizations that's helping to realize that vision is Monet, and we specifically have Nino Porchguy here of that organization, who's going to be sharing his perspective, his message, how he and his organization are working to elevate the customer experience. So first of all, Nino, how's everything going?
Oh, it's going great. We're really excited to be here. It's fantastic. You're right.
So what are you hearing in terms of conversations as people walk by, they come to the booth, they ask you about what you do? What seem to be some of those commonalities right now?
Well, the one thing that we're hearing a little bit, which is not really related to us yet at this point, is AI intelligence. That seems to be the big buzzword, right? We're looking at that. And then in the past, we've talked a little bit about, omni-channel and, just unified communications. There's a lot of different systems, siloed systems. So we've been really focused a lot about unifying all of that, right? I mean, we've always been in the cloud, but even then you have different data sources coming in from different, places, and it's really a challenge doing those integrations and getting that really holistic view of things. So that's really kind of been our focus to do that.
I love that you brought both those topics up, and I'll tell you why. So you mentioned automation and AI. You also mentioned looking across the organization at different channels.
Sure.
Both of those are obvious trends that people talk about all the time, and both involve technology. But what's really important is that both don't take us away from that fundamental centerpiece of the contact center, which is the people. It's your workforce. It's how they can engage. And obviously that's near and dear to your heart within your organization. So what do you see right now as the big bottlenecks for the human component of the customer experience?
Well, the human component is you have to manage a lot of different channels, right? And as you have the newer generations coming up, they're using less and less, telephone voice, right? I don't know if you have kids or whatever, but you'll see them, on their cell phones constantly. I mean, even in my house, I've had my daughter's friends come over, and they don't even talk. They'll giggle, and they'll realize that they're texting each other. So the way we communicate is changing. Well, that means that for the contact center, they have to manage a lot of different platforms. They have to log into a lot of different systems, and managing all those, and really understanding how does that impact your business. We had a session at SWPP a couple of weeks ago on the omni-channel, and at the very end of it, they were talking a lot about chat. Right? Because everybody in their mind says, all right, if we enable chat, maybe the call volumes will go down, right? And that's not been the case. Actually, the call volumes stay the same, but the work that they have to do now, because they have to manage the chat, is going way up. And they're trying to figure out, how is that happening? Because theoretically, it's supposed to be more efficient, right? If you're not taking phone calls, you could just chat. But now agents are doing phone calls and that, so they're becoming less efficient. So they're really trying to figure out what's driving that, how to manage it, and how to make that even better. So some of it is, doing it to where they can authenticate, so you capture all that information before you do the chat. Other one is when we talk to like Salesforce, for example, they were doing a lot of AI and bots, right, to do the routing of those, do the basic questions, so you can gather all that. So they're really trying to figure a lot of that information out. And so trying to be more efficient and reach out a wider audience of people, they're becoming a little bit less efficient. So they're trying to figure out on how do you kind of streamline all of that and actually get meaningful insight into what's happening, because that's the other thing. You get a lot of data, but it's noise. They can't really figure out what to do with that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from the unintentional consequence of looking at the technology aspect of the contact center and the people aspect separately. And when you look at them separately, you're like, okay, we're going to use technology to make things more efficient, to eliminate some of the calls that our agents have to deal with. But if you think about it that way, what ends up happening is you don't devote that same degree of humanity. You don't emphasize the connection enough in those digital channels, in that digital process. And so you end up, as you said, exactly with what you're talking about, more call volume because people aren't getting what they need out of the digital environments. You expect the technology to do technology stuff and then people just to do people stuff, when in reality, they need to be kind of working in tandem.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. One of the things, too, is I think that, we're trying to figure out how to use this technology, too, right? Because there are certain things that you can maybe answer through chat, but it becomes more complex. It's a whole different level. They also found, too, that different people can multitask a little bit better than others, and some can handle more phone calls, some can't, because you have to have some reading and writing proficiencies to be able to write. You can mask a lot of that with conversation. So they're trying to figure out different skill sets. And then, what's the volume that a human can handle? Can you handle 4 chats, 5, 1, and the complexity? So I think that just really figuring out on how do you use this new technology in a really efficient way is really key. And I don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is exactly what you're talking about. When you hear, realistically, you probably still shouldn't have someone handling more than 4 or 5 chats. Even that may be pushing it. But I think people get so caught up in that promise of they can multitask that they forget that while this is a different channel, it's still a connection business. It's still about solving problems, and you don't want to lose that connection. And so I would also argue that another challenge, you talked about how you need to have proficiency writing and you need to be able to communicate with good grammar, good punctuation, that sort of thing. But you can't sound like a robot either. You still need to also be able to demonstrate some empathy and emotion in a text-based channel.
Well, that's a very good point, because, when we are, reaching out, it's usually because there's some issue, right? Some problem. So with that comes some emotion. And, good agents, in my experience, can diffuse that, right? Just by being empathetic and listening to somebody. I don't know how you really can do that through some of the digital channels, right? Because you can misread, what the emotion is, and especially if maybe you're charged up from your last call, maybe you're misreading it a little bit, right? And maybe your responses are agitating the situation more. So you're right. I think you miss a little bit of that human connection there when you do that.
And the worst part is it's there in writing that you made the mistake. And
absolutely.
That becomes a problem too with the chat transcript environment.
Well, here's a perfect example. It was Friday night, after a long week, we ordered pizza and we were going to queue up, watch a movie. And there was an issue with it, right? So I'm like, everybody's ready. We have our pizzas out, got my beer there. I call support, and, the lady's, you have to plug in whatever into your router stuff, right? You got to go do that. And I told her, I explained to her, I was like, okay, we're sitting in front of the TV. We have pizzas out here. I have a big entertainment unit. You want me to go back there and move all these hundreds of wires and go find that one for this so I can watch a movie? And there was a long pause. And the lady on the other hand is like, I totally understand, sir. I was like, we'll have your programming up and running in 2 minutes. And I was like, thank you. She heard my pause, and she knew that I was beyond livid. And she was able to get that, right? And you cannot get that out of text. And she knew that she needed to jump on it immediately without having to go to a supervisor, get approval. She was able to make that decision and make it work immediately.
I think you're right, but I also think it's important to remember that you don't necessarily want that fear of someone getting livid to be the motivator to solve a problem quickly. And I think that that's also something to consider within chat, is that people may ask a simple question, and because it's so simple, they expect that answer to come so quickly and so easily. And so if you don't, just because they weren't yelling at you, don't understand the stakes, it becomes a problem.
I agree with you on that one. Yeah, I do agree.
So obviously this is all prefacing the fact that, when you talk about the contact center workforce, it's a changing environment.
Sure.
But we're not, as I mentioned earlier, not losing the value of the people. We're not losing the important role that they play, but they may just be playing, that importance may come from a different area and may be applied differently. Now, you have a particular, with your company, you have a particular mission, a message about how you're evolving workforce optimization. What makes you different or more relevant or more resonant than some of the other workforce management or optimization providers here? So what is kind of that story you're trying to tell over the course of this week?
Well, again, I think having a unified platform and trying to integrate all of these different technologies that are coming our way, because it is changing. It really is. Even though that there is this human connection, this experience that you do get through voice, the trends all show that it's all moving, a lot of it's moving into digital. So we still have to solve that problem, right? We still have to figure out how to really solve that. And I think that we want to be part of that, and I think we're really investing in that, that kind of future there. We work really closely with Salesforce, and they're all about digital, right? They've always been about that and being in the cloud. Yeah. And they have all these integrations.
It used to be Salesforce.com, right? That was always the name. That tells you exactly how internet-driven they are.
Yeah, exactly, right? So we as Monet have really kind of looked at that and said, okay, well, let's let's try to tackle that. And with that comes, the omni-channel part of it and everything else that we need to make sure that you can forecast and schedule for. So it's a changing environment. So we know that, and that's kind of where we're going with that, right? And same with our workforce optimization, our call recording and screen capture, QM, it's all unified in one system, right? So you could provide the same type of experience for your customers, for your internal customers, which are your employees.
And I think what that does, and that aspect of your WFO, that aspect of your platform, what it allows you to do is twofold. First of all, data needs to be the driver in today's organizations. You can't be guessing when the stakes of your agent happiness or your customer happiness are on the line. You really need that hard data in a way that aligns with your corporate mission, in a way that aligns with what your customers want. That's kind of what you need to be looking at from a quality perspective, and you need the data to understand that. But more importantly, you need that data to be actionable throughout the organization. And so just getting the right information, that just tells you what you're doing right or wrong. It doesn't let you make any fixes. And so, from my understanding, your mission is twofold. One, to get the right data in the right hands of the right stakeholders, but also make sure it's all-encompassing and always actionable.
Well, that's very, very true. So in a previous life, I worked for a company. We did business analytics, strategic analytics, BI. And one of the things that, there's all this data everywhere, but the problem is it's dirty, it's incorrect, it's inputted by humans, duplication, so it's really hard to get any meaning out of it and get any, accuracy from it. So understanding that first, and make sure you have to have good, clean data that's relevant. And then second is, you have to be able to recognize, okay, what do I actually do with this stuff, right? It's a lot of great information, but, am I being reactive? Can I be more proactive? How do I leverage this to my abilities? And I think that, that's something that we embrace here, and we see that as being really important in Monet, because there's a lot of stuff, and you got to be able to, tweak it on demand and really be able to, provide, because it's changing, constantly changes, right? The environments change, the markets change, generations, right? And what might have worked, a couple of years ago doesn't work now. So the way you interact with your employees or your customers is really important, because there's got to be like a feedback loop where you can provide training and support and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it also has to be, I think, telling a story to all different seniorities within the business, because if you don't have, if decision makers, customer contact leaders, they may know what they're looking at. The people that are speaking here, they may know, okay, here are the takeaways, here's how we have to change. But you need also the front line to understand, here's why we're evaluating one way, here's why we think you're failing or succeeding. Because not only does that motivate them, but if they understand, they can make the right decisions themselves. They start to become more autonomous, more independent. Getting back to what we referenced earlier, they don't need you to yell at them to know that they did something wrong. They can look at what's going on in the experience and make the decision themselves.
Well, that's important, because, every one of these one-on-one interactions that you have is that every one of those people on your team is an ambassador of your company, and they can save a customer, right? Or make them buy more. And, what thing that also amazes me is that a lot of folks look at contact centers as a cost, a cost component. But I would argue that it's really revenue driven, because if you have happy customers, they'll return, they'll buy more, or they won't leave, right? So there's a direct correlation. And when we do our ROIs, I have to really kind of point that out. It's not just about bodies and efficiencies. It's what impact does that have on your business? So you're right. You have to have all of these different, feedbacks for different audiences, and it does have to relate back to that person and make them understand that, this is how you make it better. And once they understand that, I think then people kind of own it, and they take pride into it, and they'll be happier, and your customers will be, and you'll make more
Yeah,
revenue.
And I think obviously the potential for revenue and value, that's clear, and I think I completely agree with you there. But I would say that it's even one step simpler than that, in that bad experiences are costly. Your agents end up wasting time on issues that never should have been issues in the first place. So it's kind of ironic that we often talk about the cost of investing in the customer experience, when in reality what's costly is a bad experience.
So there's this, I don't know where it came from, I don't know if it's true, but this is something that I always live by, that if somebody's really happy with your product and service, they'll tell 3 people. If you're very, very dissatisfied and very pissed off, you're going to tell 10 people. So it's a multiplier. It really is a multiplier. And I think you're right. If you do have a bad experience, you're more likely to be very vocal about it and blast it out there and tell everyone, because you're just mad. And if you have great experience, yeah, you might tell a few people, but you're just, that driving mechanism isn't there as anger, right? So you're right. It's really important to have a good customer experience.
Now, obviously, when you find you work with organizations that leverage your call recording, that leverage, I think, the quality component, do you find that they're looking at it more from a compliance or accuracy standpoint, or are they starting to dive into some of the more subjective, softer elements and say, okay, did you personalize this experience enough? Did you care about the customer, or is it still more transactional?
It's interesting because we see a lot of different ones, right? Some are very transactional, and others are more that customer experience, right? That sentiment. Did you really make that customer feel important, right? And so I see that and interestingly enough, I think that also relates to employee satisfaction. Right? So if you have an organization that really care about their customers, they're going to put the same type of care in their employees, because that's where it's going to start. Yeah. Because if you have employees that aren't very happy, they don't care because nobody else cares about them, they're going to treat your customers just the same. So we've seen both. We've seen both. And
I think what it comes down to is, as long as it's the right option for that company at the right time. A B2B organization, it can be transactional. It probably does need to be compliance-based. I think when you get into some B2C situations, when you get into more experience-driven businesses, that's when you want to see the subjective.
Sure.
And I think the idea is, it's not necessarily what you're choosing to measure, how you're choosing to assess quality, it's the why. And if the why is done out of the right reasons, you're going to be in a good place. And it sounds like you're able to accommodate whatever why they may have.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure, yeah. But this whole B2B and C2C, right? B2B more transactional, which I do agree with you. However, it's more costly if you lose a big business customer.
Definitely true.
Right? So even though you can be on this autopilot and have this transactional, I think you still need to be aware that they also have a pulse. There's also a person on the other end of that, and you have to make sure that they're happy.
Yeah, and that's right. And they have people judging their decisions too. So it's not just,
Totally.
If I choose a bad retail store, I only have myself to yell at. If I choose a bad, hardware vendor, then my boss is going to be mad, and I've upset a lot of people. So you're right.
Well, it could be career suicide, correct?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
it sets you back a little bit. So yeah.
So yeah, as we sort of wrap up here, I think, basically, what do you see as the opportunity to, when you're having these conversations, what do you really want the goal of those conversations to be? I know you'd love to say close 500 deals on site. That'd be amazing. But really, where do you want to go from a conversational standpoint as you're meeting the different attendees and stakeholders here?
I know this might sound kind of silly, but if you can help them better their organization and have an impact with their customers, have a better experience, and we're kind of part of that, I think that's fulfilling to a certain degree. And I think that customer experience goes all the way across the board. And if we're going to be talking about it, and that's kind of our mantra, I think that needs to come from us as well, right? And the way we interact with our customers also. And you're right. And I think a lot of times people make certain decisions, based on job security or making the right decision. And I think sometimes I think you need to kind of take a chance on it, and roll the dice and do the right thing.
Without question. Well, that's the kind of mindset we want to have here. And I think that's why people look at the exhibit hall and they look at the different sponsors here, not as people that are going to show off cool technology, but as people who are really going to help them navigate their questions. That's why this has become such a popular part of the event, and that's why we're thrilled to have you on site here.
Well, yeah, well, thank you. I think that, you can choose the right system. I don't care what technology you're talking about, right? You can choose the best out there. But if you don't have good user adoption, the right support to make it really work in your business environment, it's going to fail. It really is. So what you need to find a partner that's going to be there with you. When you hit those snags, that's going to do whatever it takes to make you successful, because that's really what it takes. Because everybody's environment is so different, you're going to run into obstacles. You just are. Changing business environments, different champions, different processes. Things get broken. If you don't have a partner that's going to be there with you through those challenges, you're going to have a really rough time. And I think that's something that we are very proud of, and we really focus on that to make sure that, we understand that they're going through their challenges and that we need to be there for them and help them out.
Well, very well said, Nino. I want to thank you so much for sharing your perspective, sharing your candid approach to this event, and more importantly, sharing your passion for helping people achieve their objectives in the customer experience world.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And this has been Brian Cantor for CCW Digital. We're going to have much more live content, many more insights, and tons of great detail to share about ways to make your contact center more efficient while also becoming more customer-centric. Thanks a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here live at CCW. It's the 19th annual version of Customer Contact Week. The biggest yet, the best yet. Thrilling sessions. We're not even halfway through the week, and we've already had some tremendous material. We've also enjoyed a very amazing, engaging awards gala, and one of the finalists this year, one of our great nominees, is our good friend Shawn Castle of Valvoline. First of all, Shawn, how is everything?
Well, Brian, thanks. Great to be here. Things are wonderful. Certainly busy and exciting, I think, not only for us, but for everyone in the industry.
Now, what was amazing, this is crazy, last year at about this exact time, we were talking about how you succeeded in the award for Best in Class Contact Center under 99 seats. And we're like, this is probably the last year you're going to be eligible because you're growing, your emphasis on the experience kept getting bigger, your contact center kept on taking a bigger role within your organization. You know your business because sure enough, you were here this year as a finalist for the 100 to 199 seat category. And so tell me about that growth. What's that entail, kind of moving up to not a huge contact center yet, but bigger than you were?
Absolutely. Tremendous growth between last year and this year. About 30% just in our people. Our volumes have gotten bigger, but just our scope has gotten bigger throughout the organization. So knowing our business, yes, is one thing, but knowing how to adjust in that kind of growth environment has been something that we're having to work really hard at. What I've found is in that smaller category, it's easier to move quickly. It's easier to do things. It's easier to do the nice things. It gets harder when a scale of 120, 150, and even more. And so what we've done is just really kind of go back to the basics. What got us to that successful position in best in class under 99 last year? And how do we expand those core competencies into a bigger category? How does it make it look and feel to our agents just like a small business? And everybody knows everybody knows the function, everybody knows what their jobs are and their duties are, and they're having fun at it. So we're working really hard, and we're certainly motivated. That's why we're here. We get to pick a lot of people's brains about what they're doing. We get to see the technology with the expo hall about what we need to implement to try to get to those efficiencies. So a lot has changed, but the one thing that's remained the same is the demands of our customers keep changing, and we've got to be in an environment to keep changing as well.
So you actually brought up two interesting ironies there. The first is that I've been to the awards gala for a few years, and I know the way they always describe the category. They always mention how under 100 seats, under 199 seats, whatever it may not have the resources of a big contact center, but you care about your customers. And yet the very first thing you said right here was it actually can be harder to get things done in a bigger organization.
Absolutely. I mean, the bus is harder to turn. And, once you get the wheel spinning, it's easier to keep the wheel spinning. But in a bigger scale, it's much more energy to get the wheel moving. And, the things that you got to do in a smaller scale, they get jeopardized sometimes because of the amount of work it takes to support that bigger infrastructure. So I think it's much harder. It takes much more dedication because you get a lot of noise throughout the day.
And then the other counterpoint that I would argue is that, again, we talk about the bigger contact center. You have all this buy-in, you have all these resources, and yet you mentioned that you want to maintain the feel of a smaller environment. And I think that's twofold. I think one is obviously small environments can really give that concierge service to customers, make them feel special, but also it's about your people. And I know this is very important to you, making them feel like you're there for them, really being a partner for them, helping to shape their journey as professionals. And so how have you sort of maintained that personal touch?
Yeah, and you're right, Brian. One of the things that we do is we look at our contact center as a great starting point for people in their career where they can move up within the contact center or move up into our business. And we've really been a great source of recruiting for our business. So I always like to explain that our folks are generalists and they know a lot about every piece of the business. And then they become specialists as they focus throughout the business. And we work really hard to do that and support them. And I think being there for them is one of the key things. And we've really tried to say, we want you to be experts in the industry. We want to give you all the tools and capabilities that will help you succeed. So, we've looked at our training this year. Bigger groups of people require different skill sets and training. We've added to our training staff. We've changed the way we're training. We've really leveraged our voice of our employee to say, can we do better? What would make your job easier? Therefore, making the customer experience better.
One of the things that I love about this particular space, and I hear this all the time when I go on site tours, when I talk to people at our event, is that a lot of people here have spent the better part of their careers in the customer contact function. They were agents themselves, they were maybe BAs for a contact center. They were essentially in the trenches.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the case for you as well. So, what's great about when you're designing an agent experience is that you don't have to just kind of do what seems right. What seems like an employee-centric approach. You really can hit on what mattered to you as you were coming up the ranks. So what are some of those things? What did you value?
Yeah, you're exactly right. 18 years ago, right, I started at a Tier 1 help desk position within our group. We had a group about 12 people. Again, to last count, about 123 people as of today. But I think for me, it was important to understand how my work mattered. What was I doing on a day-to-day basis, and how was I contributing to the overall business? Because in a big company like Valvoline or other companies, we see all this business going on and all this momentum going on, and we have to boil it down to it's one customer at a time, be it internal or external. It's either contributing to uptime with our help desk or helping a customer solve a problem so that we're driving customer retention. Is how do I see the fruits of my labor? And our organization does a great job of supporting our agents and making sure they have what they need. And we believe in them so much, we made them owners of the company, right? And so we gave them shares of stock and said, you're just as invested as anyone that's an executive level at this point. And so as I think about things, it's really keeping it simple. Do you have the knowledge? Do you have the technology? Do you have the ability to make decisions, and letting them kind of run with it? So it is a customized customer experience.
And that investment component is so crucial because I think, obviously there are times, we can all admit it, where the contact center role can get tough. Mm-hmm. You're going to deal with rude customers. Your knowledge base isn't going to be giving you what you want. Technology is going to be slow. You don't have everything. And you could look at it one of two ways. You can say, you know what, this is a job. Things aren't going right. What am I going to do? Mm-hmm. Or you could look at it from the way a business stakeholder would and be like, okay, things aren't going right, but I know that I can't let that get to the customer. I can't let them feel my pain, my frustration. And it sounds like you've come up with ways to create that sense of investment.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we look at is when we find those pain points, how do we mitigate them both in a short-term strategy, but more, and then also in a long-term strategy. So we work with our technology teams, our own system administrator, our frontline managers, and even our agents to go, what are the obstacles that we need to remove? What's a short-term stopgap solution? And then how do we look for technology solutions or process changes that eliminate them? So ultimately the customer doesn't feel that pain, and we've done really well at that. Again, it's bigger, it's harder on a bigger scale.
Yeah, but I think what's great about that is, so not only do you have, I think, the literal investment, with the stock aspect of it, but when your agents see that you're attuned to what's going on for them, where they're struggling, where they run into issues dealing with customers, they understand that you have their back. They understand that you know what it takes to deliver a great experience. And so that, I think, even increases the sense of investment they have. It increases their ability to be strong brand ambassadors.
Absolutely. I think, I always have this concept of management by walking around, right? And that's where every day I get my energy, but I also get the best feedback from our agents. Because of them, I have a job and all of my team has a job. And that's why we think about it that way. And we listen to them about, hey, what would make that better? Or little things that just come up that we can react really quickly to, drives a great deal of credibility from your team. And they believe in you. They believe you have their back. You've shown they have their back. And again, I'm more about actions and making sure that, actions speak louder than words. So I always go out and just try to get a relationship so that they do feel comfortable in bringing those things to me, even when I'm not walking around, to go, hey, we have this problem. How can we get it resolved? Or what can I do? and we were able to move pretty quickly in those kind of environments.
So one of the things that we often hear, obviously no one's going to deny we're at a customer contact event. No one's denying the importance of customer feedback.
Right.
I believe we did a survey recently with executives, and 100% of people said it was important to their strategy. It's kind of a gimme question, but still, 100%. You figured someone would be screwing around and just check no, and that's how that much they value it. But what's fascinating, and I think you started to hit on this, is that it's not just customer feedback that you want to be looking at. Agents know what's happening to the customers. They know what goes right in the experience. They know the kinds of issues. You obviously value agent feedback, but what are some of the things you hear? Not so much about, I don't want you to list the things that are going wrong with your company, but more what they believe customers really value, what's really moving the needle from a satisfaction standpoint in the eyes of the agent.
Yeah, and so there's things you can get from a conversation with an agent that it would take you an eternity to get from data or from a customer feedback score or something of that sort. But, agents can boil it down pretty quickly about what the pain points are, and speed. Speed is one of them, and ability to react quickly, to solve problems quickly is really a theme that we hear a lot. Being able to empower your agents to make those decisions on the front line has resulted in better customer experience, higher retention rates for us. And anytime we find those things that are working against that strategy, we're able to kind of remove them. And they can tell you, here are the pain points of your business because I hear them every day, right? And you can start to put that into a strategy, a mitigation strategy, as opposed to waiting for, kind of the lagging indicator of customer feedback. And you can get some validation, I think, from customer feedback, but they can tell you, gosh, we're receiving these kind of inquiries a lot, or receiving these kind of complaints or questions, and we need to work with our teams to mitigate those. So being able to kind of bring that to the executive level quickly is where I see as my job, and say, hey, our agents say we have this, I've got the data to validate it, here's our customer data to kind of support it. But even earlier on is to be able to go, our team knows our customer, here's what they're saying.
And just like that, it's about closing the loop too. Customers are going to stop giving you feedback if they don't feel you're listening,
right,
if they don't see any action taking place. With the agents, it's almost even more urgent because they're interacting with you day in and day out. A customer may not know whether you listen to their feedback for another year, the next time they have a problem. The agent knows the next hour, the next day, whether it happens. So imagine there's a lot of pressure to kind of make sure you build a feedback loop that gets closed, that the agents can see that there's merit to their opinion, that you value it and that you're taking action on it.
Absolutely. Working with our team members, whether it be in our customer care line or someone that's supporting internal customers, is communicating to our stakeholders, here's the problem, we need to come up with a mitigation plan, and then measuring and seeing the results. Of course, the agents can see the changes in their day-to-day processes to know that, okay, yeah, we see that we've made this verbiage change on, a marketing piece, or we see we've made this change on something else. We see that in real time. And I think a lot of the times it's our job as contact center leaders to bring it to the executives to think about before changes are implemented. So the more that we can be in those front conversations, the better we can help anticipate and then alleviate any pain points in the long term. Because sometimes you just don't think about privacy policy changes. You don't think about these changes and what does the customer going to receive when they receive that kind of communication or those kind of changes.
Now, another challenge as you get bigger, and again, it's not like you went from 99 seats to 5,000 seats overnight, right, but you did get bigger. And another challenge you have there is, I think, the identity of your workforce. So in terms of both who you're recruiting, but then also how you onboard them, how you train them, it may not always scale easily as you grow. It can become costly to suddenly fill another 50 or 100 seats with and still try to find those same core values, those same people. So how have you been able to sort of maintain your identity as you've gotten bigger?
Yeah, so I think what we've done is we've gone through a couple different strategy revisions on people. And I think, we're in a good spot now as to where we think about how we onboard. But I think it's about telling our story. And in this environment, especially here in the U.S., right, very low unemployment rates, it makes, I think, passive recruiting really, really important. But also telling the story about what our company brings, but also kind of showing them. When we bring people in for interviews, we take the time to let them see the environment, to let them get a sense of what that environment's like, and that's really, really important. We've also become really methodical about, onboarding, training, and so that the team member, the agent, knows what to expect, and also making sure that myself and other managers and supervisors are in on day one to get a face with the name, to talk a little bit about my story, right? I started where they're starting, and they have the opportunity to succeed just like, like I have throughout the ranks. But there's endless amounts of stories where people have gone on to marketing, they become supervisors, managers, system administrators, trainers. And so telling that story is really, really important. So we're looking at different ways about how to tell that story even before the applicant becomes an applicant, but also telling that story when they get in and become part of the team.
Yeah, you're hearing that more and more, I think. I know that's a big part of the Zappos tour we always do every year, where they mention how everyone starts on the phones, because if you don't know who your customers are and what they're asking, you can't really do any aspect of the business. And it sounds like you try to, I think, espouse that same philosophy, the idea that not look at the contact center as this is kind of our basic transactional element of our company, and the real smart people, the real serious people go elsewhere. But instead, if you don't know this, you're not going to succeed elsewhere, because you may know business, but you don't know our business.
Right. And I think the beauty of that, what I have seen, is when you start in the contact center, you get to know parts of the business you would never get to know without that experience. But then the ongoing benefits is that person that goes on to a different role or throughout the organization carries with them the knowledge of what they learned in the contact center space. And all of my feedback has been good. As we have people get promoted throughout the organization, is, wow, they really get it, and they get it quickly, and they can take a lens that no one else kind of has. So because they've been on the phones, the emails, they know what they're like. So it's been really, really important to us to kind of further that. And I think hiring that good talent in the beginning is worth the time and investment it takes to get there.
Now, this interview was meant to celebrate your award accomplishment, and I feel like we've spent a lot of time talking about the challenges of getting bigger. So as we kind of wrap up, though, what do you think you've done that was so particularly impressive that got you on that finalist list? Obviously, you have had success this year. What's been a highlight for you?
Yeah, I think managing through the change of growth in the way we've tried to stay true to those tactics that we've been using for years, and try not to get to, just because we're growing 30%, to your point, we didn't grow from 100 to 5,000, but it felt like it. And then also we've got a lot of things going on, whether it be remote agents, how we're training. So I think taking those core competencies of just how do we treat our team members, and then how are we using technology to make their life easier, and then ultimately, how is everything coming together to collectively yield a different kind of customer experience? Typically when people think of our company and our industry of Valvoline, they don't think call center. And so what we have to do is work really hard to tell our story, to make sure that people understand that is a place from a contact center, and then that they can come in and grow. But I think our team members, the way that we've evolved, it's been interesting, because our supervisors used to be generalists in everything. Now they've gotten to where the team is so big, they just supervise, which is always an opportunity for them to, that's where their heart is. And then we had to create, I think, other positions that could take on some of the administrative tasks and roles. But ultimately, it's staying true to that fundamental core concepts of things that we've considered non-negotiables. And so continuing that methodology, hopefully gets us higher in the rankings as we move out through the years.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think you hit on a message that I often hear with technology providers. I've spoken to a lot of vendors. We'll be speaking to a lot of vendors over this interview series. And one of the key things is you need to make sure that you're tying your solution, be it a strategy, be it a technology, to a purpose. And so within the context of a growing contact center, what I look at as the real takeaway is we have this goal for the value we want to create for our customers, and the growth is the instrument to achieving that goal. Look at it as not as, it's an inevitability of who you are, but instead grow because it's organic, grow because it gets you to creating a more personalized, more frictionless, whatever your goals are for the experience. That's what the growth is all about.
Absolutely. I think, the growth from our perspective is because you succeed, you get to grow, right? As opposed to we're just having to grow because we have to grow, but in growing in the right way. So taking those fundamental things that we talked about earlier from agent feedback, eliminating those problems. And then what I found is that you have to be smarter in the contact center space because you're dealing with more complex issues. Because really the closed loop process, the voice of customer process has eliminated some of the quick, easy ones, right? And now you're dealing with more complex issues that could take more time and more attention, but making sure that you've implemented have the right people, implement the right processes, that will, I think, help. But it does change a little bit, too, about the way you recruit.
Exactly. I mean, we've always talked about how the contact center space got what it wanted.
Yeah.
It wanted to be appreciated, it wanted to be recognized, it wanted to be a source of meaningful engagement with customers. More and more organizations understand that now. But now that understanding is there, you have to deliver. You have to have the processes, you have to have the training, you have to have the systems, you have to have the people who are capable of those real connections.
Absolutely. And having the right people in the right places, right, is important. And I think having people that could kind of push the envelope, as Barbara talked about this morning, right? You got the expanders and the containers. We're looking for expanders in those roles that can think about things differently and become disruptors in the space and think about the customer experience differently.
Well, Shawn Castle, it's always a pleasure to have you here. It's no surprise when you're part of that awards gala because you do all the right things, you have the right vision for your contact center, and I can't wait to see how, whether you're still in the 100 to 199 seat category, whether you're over 200, I can't wait to see the amazing transformations you make within your organization.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to be able to touch base with these folks, and we truly are very community based. And this is in Contact Center Week and CCW. We've become much more focused on that, and we learn from each other.
Great. Well, on behalf of CCW Digital, this has been Brian Cantor. We're live on site all week here in CCW Vegas, talking to great people like Shawn Castle, and we'll come at you with more content, more insights, and more ways to take your customer contact function to the next level.